Have you ever wondered what silence really means in politics? Is it hesitation, or a trap being set in plain sight? It began, as these things often do, without drama, just a meeting request. A tidy email, translated into French and more, addressed to the office of the President of Burkina Faso. It came from a well-funded, well-known NGO affiliated with a European trade group, offering partnership, technology, and economic upliftment through sustainable land solutions. The language was polished, curated like a wine label, smooth enough to slide past suspicion. But Ibrahim Traoré read between the spaces, not just the lines. And what he saw wasn't a deal. It was a test. The request arrived mid-morning on a Monday, the heat already rising like smoke from the pavement outside the presidential compound in Ouagadougou. Inside, the air conditioning hummed softly as Traoré sat alone, reviewing updates on school lunch programs and crop rotation success rates from the western provinces. Simple files. But in this office, they were the heartbeat of the nation. Then Marie entered. She didn't speak at first. Just placed the printed email on his desk and stood by, waiting. Traoré read the header once, twice. Then again more slowly. A European NGO, tied to a food intelligence consortium, offering to help digitize agricultural reform. They wanted a private audience with the president, no press, no cameras. He looked up. And the attachments? Policy white papers, Marie said. Slick. Flashy. Almost too perfect. Almost, he asked. There's nothing in them, Mr. President. Buzzwords. Graphs. Not one real timeline. No named engineers. No local partners. It's not a proposal. It's bait. He nodded once. Then said nothing for a long time. Marie tilted her head. Should I alert internal security? Traoré stood, walked to the window, and parted the curtain with 2 fingers. Below, school children were filing into a government-run learning center. Some still wore patched-up shoes. Some were barefoot. But they were laughing. Alive. Whole. He let the curtain fall. No, he said. Don't alert them. Not yet. Later that week, the delegation arrived. 3 men in tan suits stepped from a black SUV. They moved like a sales team but spoke like diplomats. Smiles trained. Posture rehearsed. Their leader introduced himself as Pascal Ducler, Director of Strategic Growth at the Food Intelligence Consortium. Inside the conference room, no cameras, no staff beyond Marie and 1 interpreter, Traoré sat quietly at the far end of the table. His only movement, a slow stirring of tea in a plain ceramic cup. Mr. President, Pascal began, Burkina Faso has shown remarkable resilience. Our partners in Brussels believe the time is right to accelerate your agricultural modernization. With our digital platform, your crop output could increase by 40% in 3 years. He slid forward a glossy document with stylized graphs and colorful, looping text. It was thick. Impressive to the untrained eye. Meaningless to those who knew what real change cost. Traoré didn't pick it up. He looked at Pascal. Then at the 2 silent men flanking him. He smiled. I appreciate your interest. You've clearly studied our needs. Pascal's eyes lit up. We have. Deeply. We understand your goal is food independence. We can help you get there, faster. Traoré nodded. And what would you require from us? Pascal chuckled softly. Just cooperation. A few exclusive data access rights. Perhaps co-leadership of a national strategy team. It would help us move with speed. Marie's jaw tensed, but she said nothing. Traoré leaned back. Let me think on it, he said. I prefer to listen first. Act later. Pascal tried to hide his surprise. He was expecting negotiation, debate, perhaps even skepticism. Instead, he received silence. And silence unnerved him. That evening, Marie entered Traoré's private office. You know they're not here to help, she said, closing the door behind her. They've already requested back-end access to our national crop database. They're not interested in growing food. They want to own the system. Traoré said nothing for several seconds. Then, softly. They've misread us. They think silence is surrender. But we've been silent before every revolution we've ever won. Marie took a breath. So what do we do? He turned from the window and looked her square in the eyes. We wait. And when they believe they've won, we make sure they go home with the wrong victory. Outside, the heat of the day had softened, but the tension had not. Beneath the stillness of Ouagadougou, a storm was stirring. Not one of fire or weapons, but of narratives, of games played in suits and data packets. A war of perception. And as night fell over the capital, Ibrahim Traoré began laying the first stones of a path only he could see. Not with noise. But with silence. Because the loudest answer he could give was still to come. The world loves certainty. Investors love confidence. And spies? They love when their mark smiles and says nothing. Within 48 hours of the first meeting, whispers spread through diplomatic corridors in Ouagadougou. The word was out, the president hadn't pushed back. No objections. No resistance. The foreign advisors interpreted it as soft approval, a man too hesitant, or too polite, to say no. In Paris, a mid-level operative forwarded a message to Brussels. Engagement viable. Next stage can proceed. Meanwhile, in the palace, Ibrahim Traoré sat alone with a folder on his desk. Not the proposal from the Food Intelligence Consortium. Something else, handwritten, drafted by his own intelligence team. A decoy. Each page had been curated to appear authentic. Agricultural projections. Market access strategies. Regional maps with colored overlays showing ideal yield zones. But everything was fiction. Realistic fiction. The kind that lured hawks. Marie entered with a datapad and a frown. They've requested a second meeting. They said they want to finalize terms. Good, Traoré replied, without looking up. Marie raised a brow. Mr. President, this will escalate. Once they believe we've opened the door, they'll barge through it. I know, he said. That's the plan. Later that week, the second meeting took place. This time, Pascal Ducler brought more than documents. He brought a new face, a younger woman named Elise Mainin, introduced as their agricultural systems lead. She spoke less, but her eyes moved constantly, scanning the room, measuring every silence. Traoré greeted them with the same calm as before, offering strong Burkinabe coffee instead of tea. Pascal smiled widely. Mr. President, thank you for trusting us. We're thrilled to move forward. Traoré returned the smile. Trust is earned. You're still earning it. Pascal chuckled. Understood. We've brought a revised outline with clearer timelines, as requested. He slid across a new folder. Elise added, we've also included suggested metrics for tracking growth, real-time data flow from cooperative farms to the ministry. Traoré flipped through the packet slowly, expression unreadable. Then he reached beneath the table and produced a second folder, clean, thick, marked, internal use only. Our team has outlined a parallel initiative, he said smoothly. You may find it aligns with your platform. Pascal's eyes glimmered. May we? Traoré nodded. Take it. Review it privately. If your team sees value, we'll talk next steps. It was bait. But perfectly baited. That night, in a hidden basement room 2 floors below the palace, Marie and 3 cybersecurity officers surrounded a projection wall. On it, a digital log of the fake documents Traoré had handed over. Each file was embedded with trackable watermarks, small variances in phrasing, subtle color codes in charts, and embedded file signatures. Within 90 minutes, one officer said, the documents were scanned and sent to 5 foreign domains. 3 routed through a diplomatic IP, said another. 2 went through a private consulting firm based in Geneva. Marie folded her arms. And the originals? Untouched. No edits. They believe they're genuine. She looked at the footage from earlier that day, Pascal and Elise leaving the palace, smiling, thanking staff, completely unaware. Marie tapped her earpiece. "He's in his study," came the voice of the steward. She nodded. "Good. He'll want to know the trap has sprung." By morning, reports began to filter in. European agricultural monitors started modeling Burkina Faso's false plan as real. Think tanks released cautious endorsements. A private blog with ties to a former World Bank analyst published a glowing summary titled, "Burkina Faso's Bold New Leap in Agrotech Reform." Traoré read it over breakfast. Calm. Focused. "They're moving faster than I expected," he murmured. Marie entered moments later, a data chip in her hand. "All 5 target entities have mirrored the plan to their partners," she said. One even held a webinar featuring projections lifted directly from the fake files. Traoré smiled. "Good," he said. "Then they've bought it." She stepped closer. "And now?" He stood and looked out the window toward the horizon. "We go live." Marie's eyes flicked toward him. "A press conference?" "No. A reckoning." The capital didn't know it yet. But something was brewing behind the walls of the presidential palace. In the media office, cameras were being checked. Lighting adjusted. Flags ironed and placed. Local and foreign correspondents received sealed invitations labeled, "Special briefing with the President of Burkina Faso." No time listed. No subject explained. Online, speculation began. Some said it was about security reforms. Others whispered of cabinet dismissals. But only 2 people in the palace knew the truth. And they weren't whispering. Across town, in a quiet embassy room, Pascal Ducler leaned over a laptop with Elise beside him. "This is gold," Elise whispered. "They're giving us everything. Real-time data, future zones, even phased investment models." Pascal grinned. "They think we're helping them. But this," he tapped the folder, "is how we take control, without ever firing a shot." He poured a drink and raised his glass toward the window. To subtle wars. But he didn't know that his war was already lost. And that the man he thought was bluffing was about to make the entire world watch. The room was quiet, too quiet for what it was about to witness. In the underground command center of the presidential palace, screens blinked to life one by one. Burkinabe intelligence officers, dressed in plain suits, sat before them, heads tilted forward like chess masters mid-game. The fake documents had moved. Tracked. Copied. Distributed. The final confirmation had come from a secure signal intercept the night before. A private firm in Zurich had forwarded a detailed Burkina Agro asset acquisition report to 2 consulting firms in Brussels. It was signed. Source: Internal Presidential Cooperation Files, Burkina Faso. Marie stood at the center of it all, flanked by her cyber and intel team. Her eyes were hard. Focused. "They're confident now," one officer said. "They believe the plan is real." Marie didn't smile. She didn't blink. "Then we begin phase 2. At 10:17 a.m., Pascal Ducler and Elise Meinin were formally invited back to the presidential palace. The message was polite, vague, an offer to finalize deliverables and build public alignment. Neither of them hesitated. They didn't know that while they sipped coffee in the waiting lounge, hidden cameras had already been installed in the briefing room. They didn't know that the papers they carried now had invisible UV-coded markers. And they didn't know that every word, every movement, every pixel of their presence was being recorded, not just for review, but for eventual broadcast. At 11:02 a.m., they entered the meeting room. Traoré was already there. Not at the head of the table this time, but seated at its center, eye to eye with them. Level ground. No hierarchy. Just presence. Welcome, he said, motioning for them to sit. Pascal slid into his chair with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. Elise opened her sleek black folio, ready to share feedback on the president's draft strategy. We're thrilled by the speed and transparency, Mr. President, Pascal began. It's rare to see such trust in our line of work. Trust, Traoré repeated. It must be earned. Pascal chuckled. And we intend to earn it. Traoré tilted his head. So I've heard. The next hour unfolded like a quiet storm. Elise walked them through possible joint initiatives. Pascal suggested rolling out the pilot programs in 3 provinces to build immediate traction. Traoré said little. Just nodded occasionally. Asked simple questions. And behind a concealed panel, red lights blinked steadily. Recording. Encoding. Storing. The trap wasn't sprung with drama. It clicked into place with elegance. When the meeting ended, Traoré stood and shook Pascal's hand. Thank you for your continued partnership. I hope we can do great things, together. Pascal smiled. Elise smiled. But neither saw the steel in his eyes. They left the room at 12:14 p.m. The moment the door shut, Marie entered through a side panel. She walked to the console, pulled out a data drive, and slotted it into a secure terminal. Within seconds, the entire footage played on screen. Pascal highlighting forged documents. Elise marking target zones that didn't exist. Mentions of private equity extraction masked in investment lingo. All in high definition. All admissible. All irrefutable. Traoré sat in silence. Then, send the recordings to our diplomatic review team. Have them transcribe every word. No leaks yet. We go public when the whole web is visible. Marie nodded. We're tracking the next layer now. Pascal's files have been passed to a European intelligence subcontractor. And? She paused. Traoré looked up. And? One of the envoys at the French embassy made contact with them last night. We have audio, encrypted, but we'll get it. The president leaned back, exhaled slowly. So now we know it's not just speculation. She said nothing. He closed his eyes. Good. Then it's time. 3 hours later, while the capital bustled with market sounds and radio chatter, the media center beneath the palace erupted in motion. Tripods clacked open. Cables were tested. Logos aligned. A broadcast message was drafted and sent to every major outlet in West Africa. Then to Al Jazeera. BBC Africa. France 24. Emergency statement from the Office of the President of Burkina Faso, live stream access to be granted in 24 hours. The rumors ignited like wildfire. Was there a coup attempt? A resignation? A declaration of war? In the palace, there was no chaos. Just preparation. Just stillness. Just the calm before a historic reveal. Across the city, Pascal and Elise clinked glasses over dinner at a high-end diplomatic residence. You see? Pascal grinned. I told you. Open doors. No resistance. He wants this deal. Elise sipped wine. And Brussels wants it on their desk by next week. She raised her glass. To information. The most elegant weapon. They toasted. And in the shadows of the capital, their betrayal was already encoded, documented, and about to be televised. Because the man they thought was bluffing had been watching them through glass. And tomorrow, the world would too. The next morning, Burkina Faso didn't wake up to the sound of war, but to something just as rare. A silence that felt like the air was holding its breath. At 9 a.m. sharp, the city shifted. Motorbikes slowed near roadside radios. Shopkeepers turned their screens outward. Security checkpoints stiffened. Journalists poured into the briefing hall of the presidential compound, cameras mounted, tripods locked. There were no leaks. No agenda. Just 2 words printed on the official press banner. Emergency address. And when the double doors opened, no one expected what they saw. Ibrahim Traoré walked out, not in Western business wear, but draped in traditional Faso Dan Fani cloth, deep brown with golden stripes. The pattern told a story. Earth. Struggle. Sovereignty. There were no teleprompters. No cue cards. Only a single podium and a man who had waited long enough. He looked across the crowd. At Burkinabe journalists. International correspondents. Embassy observers. Every lens fixed on him. He adjusted the microphone. Good morning. A pause. In recent weeks, we've welcomed visitors. Investors. Diplomats. Friends. His voice was steady. Clear. No anger. Just wait. We were approached with promises. Proposals dressed in partnership. But what came cloaked as development was, in truth, something else. The room hushed. Pens froze. Cameras inched forward. These proposals sought not just collaboration, but quiet control. Access. Ownership. He leaned forward slightly. And in silence, we listened. A murmur passed through the press pit. Traoré continued. We did not rush to condemn. We allowed the process to unfold. We welcomed them with courtesy, while tracking every word. Every transfer. Every file. Behind him, the wall screen flickered to life. Footage began to play. Pascal Ducler in the presidential briefing room, casually pointing to forged agricultural zones. Elise Mainin nodding as she mentioned data pipelines and territorial incentives. A map glowing with false figures and fake projections, presented as gospel. Cameras clicked wildly. Some correspondents whispered into their recorders. Traoré didn't flinch. These documents were created by us. On purpose. Because we suspected a leak. A manipulation. He paused again. So we gave them something to steal. The screen changed, an overlay of international email routes, time-stamped. European IP addresses. Financial firms. Government contractors. Traoré let it linger. Then spoke again, slower this time. What you see here is not speculation. It is not accusation. It is evidence of coordinated attempts to subvert national policy, under the pretense of partnership. A reporter from France stood, stammering a question, but Traoré raised a hand gently. Let me finish. The room went still again. We are not a fragile nation. We are not naive. But we are patient. Another beat passed. Then the final slide appeared. The real national plan. The true reform strategy, community-led, regionally balanced, and already in progress without foreign hands. Traoré gestured toward it. This is Burkina Faso's vision. Not what was sold to consultants. Not what was funneled through embassies. This. Built by our people. Funded by our land. Protected by our silence. The silence now, in the room, was thunderous. Then came his closing lines. Not rehearsed, felt. We don't seek confrontation. We seek clarity. He locked eyes with the front row. If your policy requires deception, your partnership is poison. If your support is only offered when you control the outcome, then it is not support, it is soft conquest. Cameras zoomed in. Today, we say no. With dignity. With truth. And with the eyes of the world upon us. He stepped back from the mic, gave a short nod. Then turned and walked away. The room erupted, not in chaos, but in energy. Dozens of reporters scrambled for statements. Analysts live tweeted in multiple languages. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag Traoré Truth. Hashtag Africa is awake. Hashtag they thought he was bluffing. At an embassy compound across the city, Pascal Ducler watched the broadcast in stunned silence. Elise stood behind him, hands pressed to her mouth. There was nothing to say. Nothing to spin. The footage was real. The emails were traceable. The betrayal was documented. And most terrifying of all, they had no idea they were ever being watched. A phone rang beside him. A European country code. He didn't answer. He knew what it would say. Back at the palace, Marie entered the private office just after the broadcast ended. Traoré stood by the window, watching the city below. You just called their bluff in front of the planet, she said softly. I didn't bluff, he replied. I waited. She handed him a tablet. It's working. Public sentiment is surging. Diplomats are pulling back. And our own ministries, they're re-energized. He nodded slowly. They needed to see it. Not just hear it. Marie smiled faintly. So what now? He turned to her. Now we stop reacting. And we start leading. Outside, the national flag danced in the rising wind. The capital had not changed overnight. But something deeper had. Perception. Ownership. Dignity. They thought Ibrahim Traoré was bluffing. They thought silence meant weakness. But now, they knew. He had simply been waiting for the moment the truth would make the most noise. And when he went live, the silence ended. The sun rose quietly over Ouagadougou the next morning. But the silence this time was different. Not suspicion. Not waiting. It was awe. In the dusty streets, market stalls opened early. Radios played the president's speech on a loop. Mothers hummed along. Taxi drivers rolled down windows just to let the sound drift louder. And in villages far from the capital, elders sat with youth beneath mango trees, replaying the moment when a nation's dignity was spoken not in defiance, but in truth. On social media, the world was catching up. Clips of the briefing were translated into French, English, Swahili, and Arabic within hours. Major publications scrambled to reframe their narrative. What was first dismissed as a minor African press event had turned into a global masterclass in strategic patience and media warfare. A well-known African journalist tweeted, "No shouting. No threats. Just a truth bomb wrapped in elegance." Traoré truth isn't just a hashtag, it's a doctrine. A Western analyst reluctantly wrote, Burkina Faso may have just rewritten the rulebook on soft power resistance. But inside the presidential compound, there was no celebration. Just work. Marie entered Traoré's office with 2 items in hand, a dossier and a phone. The dossier is from our intelligence team. It contains fallout summaries. Some embassies have gone dark. One envoy left the country quietly at dawn. He nodded. And the phone? She smiled faintly. It's from Fatou. Traoré raised a brow. The girl from Bobo Dioulasso? Marie nodded. She saw the speech. And she asked if she could speak at the launch event for the new irrigation program. He took the phone, pressed play. The girl's voice came through, uncertain but determined. I want to tell the people what I saw. That we are not small. That we are not weak. We are just beginning. He listened twice. Then turned to Marie. Give her the microphone. The following week, the first Truth for Sovereignty public forum was held in the open air, just outside the newly inaugurated Innovation and Sustainability Center in the city's heart. Colorful woven banners lined the roads. Farmers stood beside engineers. Local chiefs shook hands with policy analysts. It was not politics. It was not ceremony. It was ownership. Ibrahim Traoré stood at the back of the crowd, not yet on stage. Watching. Fatou stood nervously beside Marie, clutching her worn notebook and blinking at the sea of faces. Traoré stepped beside her. You're ready. She looked up. But I'm just a girl. He smiled gently. No. You're a voice. That's what they fear most. On the stage, Fatou stepped to the mic. She didn't speak right away. She opened her notebook, glanced at her mother in the crowd, then closed it. My name is Fatou. I am 16. My village once had no clean water. But now we have fields again. My school has lunch. And yesterday, I saw the man who gave us that stand in front of the world, and say no. The crowd leaned in. So now I say no too. No to being told we must be saved. No to being spoken for. No to being sold without knowing. A beat. My name is Fatou. I am Burkina Faso. And we will feed ourselves. The audience erupted. Not in applause alone, but in something deeper. In pride. That night, Traoré returned to his office. Marie was already waiting. She held a final report. 3 major donors have reversed course. They now offer partnership without strings. He chuckled softly. Ah. So now they remember how to ask. She grinned. And analysts are calling it the Ouagadougou doctrine. Your silence as strategy. He walked to the window again, the city below glowing in warm amber lights. Let them write doctrines. We'll write futures. Marie's face softened. You didn't just win, you taught. No, he said. We remembered. That's more powerful. She looked out with him. Then what's next? He paused. Now, we build loudly. Across oceans, the message still rippled. In Brussels, late-night meetings scrambled to assess damage. In Washington, analysts noted shifts in African media alignment. In Accra, Nairobi, Bamako, presidents whispered of what-ifs. And on African soil, people began to ask themselves a new question. What if we stop asking for permission to lead ourselves? Traoré didn't need to answer it. He had already lived it. Somewhere in the countryside, a boy listened to the radio as his father harvested the first tomatoes from a new irrigation line. A teacher wrote lesson plans using local success stories. A muralist in Bobo Dioulasso painted a portrait of Traoré with a fistful of seeds in one hand, and a microphone in the other. And Fatou, now known across the country, received her first letter from a girl in Senegal. It read, I saw you speak. I want to speak too. Can I? Fatou smiled. Yes, she whispered. We all can. They thought Ibrahim Traoré was bluffing. That his silence was weakness. That his patience was passivity. But now, the silence had spoken. And the world had no choice but to listen.